We are recording, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everybody, for the regularly scheduled Garden City Council meeting for Monday, April 27th. Clerk, please call the meeting to order.
So this meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204. Councilmember Carver Herbert. Here. Councilmember Jorgensen. Here. Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Here.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, consent agenda, Councilmember Page.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda as written.
I would second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to special business. We have several proclamations today. The first one is Denim Day proclamation, which is today, April 27th. So I'll read that. And this is this proclamation relates to drawing attention to sexual assault. Okay, whereas the United States government has declared April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and the WCA was represented here today, has declared April 29th, 2026 as Denim Day. And whereas both events are intended to draw attention to the fact that sexual assault remains a serious issue in our society, and whereas harmful attitudes about sexual assault allow these crimes to persist and allow survivors to be re-victimized, and whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Denim Day were all instituted to call attention to misconceptions and misinformation about rape and sexual assault, and the problem that many in society remain disturbingly uninformed with respect to issues of assault. And whereas every 68 seconds, someone in America is sexually assaulted, and approximately 1 in 4 women is raped during their lifetime. And whereas with proper education on the matter, there's compelling evidence that we can be successful in reducing the incidence of this alarming and psychologically damaged crime. And whereas the City of Garden City is an important partner with the efforts of the WCA to educate residents about the true impact of rape and sexual assault. Now, therefore, I, William Jacobs, Mayor of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim April 29th, 2026 to be Denim Day. So thank you, and thank you, Laura, for coming. We want to get a picture up front of proclamation.
Yeah. So I need somebody to speak. Thank you. I'll leave that. I think you're fine.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Oh. I appreciate
Okay. The second proclamation is National Travel and Tourism Week.
Yes.
Yeah, we got MJ with her Technicolor coat.
Bring some enthusiasm.
Exactly. Here we go. All right. Okay, whereas the travel industry is essential to the success of every industry and remains a critical driver of Garden City, Idaho's economy, workforce, and development. And whereas travel is a national economic powerhouse, generating $3 trillion in output, wow, supporting 15 million American jobs, including 1 in every 11 US jobs, and producing $92 billion in state and local tax revenue to fund essential services such as education, emergency response, and public safety. And whereas travel supports vibrant, connected, and prosperous communities by driving innovation, business growth, and opportunity across industries, including manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and more. And whereas maintaining a globally competitive travel industry requires continued growth in domestic and international travel, fostering economic prosperity, mutual understanding, and national connectivity. And whereas growing travel strengthens communities and benefits businesses, reinforcing its role as an essential industry. Now, therefore, I, William Jacobs, Mayor of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim May 3rd through 9th, 2026 as National Travel and Tourism Week. So you get a whole week, not just a day. We gotta look at the. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I believe I have to do this.
Correct.
That's not I take.
Got it.
MJ.
Sorry.
That's-
Mr. Mayor, fellow council members, I wanted to take a real quick second. Each of you have asked about the success of the shuttle bus that's being provided. And I want to acknowledge and thank the Garden City Visitors Bureau. This has been, in my opinion, an amazing effort between the chamber and the Visitors Bureau, and it could not have happened without your team. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Mary Jo.
Takes a village.
That's right.
Really does on some of these things. Okay, this next one is pretty special too, because it has a nexus to the city. This is we're supporting a proclamation for our canine safety, and Charlie's mom, Cheryl, had donated a Kevlar vest. Is that correct? Am I describing that correct? And he is here to actually model said vest. So we'll want to make sure we get a picture of that. So I'm going to read this proclamation. So this is pretty awesome. So whereas the Garden City Police Department deploys trained police service canines to support lawful public safety operations and officer safety, and whereas police service canines face real line of duty hazards and protective equipment such as properly fitting ballistic and stab resistant canine vests can help reduce the severity of injury. And whereas Cheryl Wadhams has offered a charitable donation of $1,000 to support the purchase of a new canine ballistic vest, this includes the carrier and the panels, for GCPD's canine Kano. And whereas the city appreciates this community partnership and supports reasonable measures to protect law enforcement animals serving the public. And now, therefore, I, William Jacobs, Mayor of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim Monday, April 27th as Cheryl Wadhams Police Canine Safety Day. So, very good.
It was like, yes.
She doesn't do this. She knows about it. My gosh. Yeah.
Good boy. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a mouse.
Some sharp guns.
Very good. Charlie, please stay.
No, you don't. Your nose is mistaken.
Just have one printed and put in the print. Against the print. That's cool. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Even Kano's fired up about those new threads. All right, thanks, officer.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you. That was fun. I like those proclamations. Okay. Next, item 4 is the Development Services Department of Notice of Decisions, and I've asked, she's already, she's already come up to, we had a little bit of discussion on one of the topics, and so I've asked Director Thornburg to come up and just explain.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick time. Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes, thank you, President of the Council. Mr. Mayor, due to my personal knowledge on multiple items that are under the notice of decisions, I must recuse myself.
Okay. Thank you for.
Sorry for the interruption.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I just wanted to give you a briefing, I guess, on one of the items that's on the notice of decisions, and that's conditional use fiscal year 2026 number 9. And that is a conditional use that is kind of like an umbrella conditional use for several uses located at 521 East 41st Street. It has come to staff's attention that there's some confusing components within the decision itself. Not that the decision is in error, but there are under item number 2 of the conditions of approval, for example, it lists a number of a number of uses, but then starting on page 7 through page 13, there is specific conditions, and those don't quite match. And so what staff is proposing tonight is to make sure that staff has accurately reflected what the true intent of the commission's decision is by taking that back to the commission and cleaning up any language. The intent is not to change the decision that they were making by any means, nor to add any evidence, but just make it really crystal clear within the decision which uses are intended to be in this document. That will occur on May 20th, but I suspect your city attorney will request a motion to toll in the meantime. And I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Director Thornburg? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
permission to pull the council. Council members, Garden City Code 86A 2A states in part, the council shall have the authority to review any action taken through the administrative process with notice or public hearing process when an appeal is not made, but the city council determines in a public meeting within 15 days of the final decision that there may be significant adverse impact to the city as a result of the final decision, making the city affected or aggrieved by the final decision, which would be final unless appealed. Such council reviews are not de novo. That's not the whole statute. That's the portion that's relevant here. In light of this 15-day statutory provision, first I would move to toll all statutory deadlines for this item number to May 20th, date certain May 20th, which is when the planning and zoning will meet again.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask for a quick point of order? Do you want to toll it for that? Is your motion to toll it for that date, or should it be a different date? Because then it will.
That'd be the date of the decision, correct?
Is that what your motion is? I mean,
Let's get clarification on that. So the day of the decision
is right.
Let's have Jenna clarify the dates, please.
Mayor, members of the council, the date of the clarification of the decision would be May 20th, within the initial decision being made on April 15th.
So the date of the approval would be April 15th, the day of the clarification would be May 20th. Is that correct?
Mayor, that is correct.
Any further questions?
My motion will stand.
Yeah. Second, do we vote on that then?
I would call for.
Okay. Call roll, please.
Councilmember Carver Herbert. Yes. Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as to the rest of the remaining items on the notice of decisions, council, does anyone wish to call out an administrative action listed under this agenda item under the standard found in Garden City Code 86A 2A?
No.
Mr. Mayor, no action.
No action. Okay. Thank you. Then, let's get Councilmember Jorgensen back. All right, our next presenter is Nick Kraus from Morrison Merrily Inc., which is formerly QRS Engineering. And so we asked Nick to come and present from the city to give, some of you have updated on the floodplain discussion, getting a new map on the floodplain. Monthly staff reports. Oh, I jumped ahead, Nick. Sorry, real quick. Any questions on the monthly staff reports?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
I appreciate this opportunity, and I did want to comment. I think oftentimes we neglect to thank our staff. And notably this month, I am always impressed with our library and the services they provide to the community, and having distributed over 100 books to kindergartners is just, it's an impressive step in advancing literacy in our community. Secondly, I also, and similarly, I wanted to commend Director Schmidt and his staff and team and contractors who remedied the disgraceful destruction of the Pam Beaumont Park and the replacement of that equipment. They were thoughtful, professional, and considerate of the community, and I'm thrilled to see that replacement completed. Lastly, I did have a question for the chief, but he's not here. So Lieutenant, maybe you could step in for him. There was a comment regarding training, and specifically Axon training. And the comment was, I'm not sure why we are required to do that. And I wanted to ask the question, are we asking our law enforcement officers to participate in training that isn't bringing value, or is that it impeding efficiency by clearly, I mean, training is extremely valuable, but recognizing there is a balance, and we don't want to have law enforcement officers tied up in training that isn't necessary or bringing value.
So Axon is a very large company. So we do use the Axon cameras. We also use the Axon with the tasers. So I don't know exactly what training they're referring to, but we are required to do.
This referenced taser training.
Yeah, so we have to do yearly taser training in order to keep our certification with taser or with Axon. And that's so that we can be protected in court, and they'll come and testify on our behalf as far as their equipment that we're using if we follow their training.
So are we, because the report I may be misinterpreting it, but it sounds like it's duplicated training.
It is repetitive training. It is, the training doesn't change, the equipment isn't changing, but it is required through Axon as far as for their legal coverage to cover the officers that we participate in the training.
So my question, Mr. Mayor, is there an opportunity to demonstrate training completed in other areas?
My understanding, per Chief Stambaugh, is that if in order to use their tasers and buy their tasers, they require us to pay for their training. So it's a service that they provide in order to, I could say, enhance their revenue through training and making sure that we're protected. Correct. Is how I would word that. So we're essentially obligated.
Their liability.
Right, exactly. We're obligated to do their training if we want to be covered by other obligation. And so we have to do this annually.
Thank you.
You bet.
I really appreciate the explanation.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yes.
So are there other companies out there that provide?
There are not.
These?
They are the only ones.
Hence why they require. It's almost like, put it this way, it's like a subscription model
Mhm.
of software.
Yep.
That's probably the best way I can, the analogy I would use.
Good.
And so that's how good questions. Council, thank you for reading those reports. We do have a great staff. Colin's team put that playground very quickly. I'd also commend the Urban Renewal Agency that helped with that. And so, we continue to kill it with our staff. So, Mr. Kraus, so I asked Mr. Kraus to come to talk about the floodplain. I've kind of talked to some of you individually about where we're at and needing to update our maps. One disadvantage that the city has is our floodplain covers a vast swath of our city. And there are actually two models out there. One's FEMA, one's Corps of Engineers. And so what we're trying to do is the Corps of Engineers, FEMA doesn't create their own maps. They use other agencies like the Corps of Engineers for their map modeling, but they don't always use the Corps of Engineers modeling. They can find somebody else. So we want to be able to work with them and I guess consult with FEMA, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kraus, to use the 2D model that the Corps gave us because it takes a significant portion of the city out of the floodplain. And so part of that is presentation by Mr. Kraus explaining kind of that. And then also I'm asking for funding to as consulting fee to work with FEMA to ideally adopt the Corps model. It's one of our top priorities, one of my top priorities, the city, because it would significantly reduce the cost of development in our city. And it would also significantly reduce homeowners insurance FEMA expenses if they chose to not have to get it. And so it's a big money saving thing for the city, particularly on development. So it hinders development. So with that preamble, correct me if I said anything incorrectly, Mr. Kraus, and if you could give your name for the record, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. No, that was a great summary. Just kind of an intro. I was here in front of this group, I don't know, it's been some months ago now, quite a while ago. But I've been around the Valley for almost 30 years, kind of working in the flood modeling business. And then I've had the privilege of working with the city, city staff, Jenna, and your engineer, Joe Canning, as the city has worked with the Corps of Engineers to develop this two-dimensional model that the mayor was talking about, as we've been looking at flood impacts in the city and ways to mitigate that. Quick background too, we were QRS Consulting, Quadrant, then QRS Consulting for about 28 years here in the Valley. And then we have competition, and like Axon, I haven't figured out how to get into that kind of business. But we were recently acquired by a company, Morrison Merrily out of Montana. They were just very interested in the Southern Idaho office. I've worked with them most of my career. Actually was an employee there very early in my career, and good friends with the CEO, and they were really looking at an Idaho presence, and more story there that, really doesn't necessarily pertain to here. But so real quick background is Mayor was talking about going back to 2016, FEMA, the Corps of Engineers created a new flood study for the Boise Valley. The risk maps, if they had been adopted that came out at that time, they were adopted by Boise City in 2020. They would have heavily impacted Garden City taxpayers. So I assume it was this body elected to not adopt those maps and go into a seclusion process, basically allowing the city to look at options and alternatives. And it was kind of it's been a long, involved process. The city started working with the Corps of Engineers to look at alternatives to reduce flood risk throughout the city. And then in 2022, Garden City initiated a general investigation process with the Corps. And that process looked at two things. It was created a draft integrated feasibility report, which was really a product that looked at physically reducing flood risk. And then as a part of that, they developed a very comprehensive two-dimensional hydraulic model of the Boise River through Garden City. It was the most accurate, really representative model of the Boise River that's ever been developed. And then the other side of that, the Corps was looking at a project, really a project implementation to reduce flood risk, take that model, reduce flood risk through construction of levees and reconstruction really of the green belt. Significant sticker price attached to that, depending on which version you looked at, but in the tens of millions of dollars. But really, I'm here mostly to talk about that two-dimensional model. Because once the study got to draft form, the city elected not to move forward with implementation. I think largely because of cost, and there were a lot of other things involved with impacts along the river. But the hydraulic model was delivered to the city by the Corps last December, and then we've looked at it with staff. Since we were kind of involved with the whole process, is kind of what are our options? What can that model be used for besides implementing a tens of millions of dollar infrastructure project? And what we did is the next 3 slides, we overlaid that two-dimensional model output, which is the blue. Everything in blue is flooding in Garden City. So this is kind of Glenwood Street downstream to Eagle Island. And where you see kind of random scattered blue, that's kind of like shallow flooding in city streets. The yellow is the 2016 FEMA model that had the city adopted it. That would have been the new 100-year floodplain. So basically all the way out to State Street on the north, large parts of the developed areas south of the river, between the river and Chinden. This slide kind of shows Veterans Memorial to Glenwood, kind of same thing, where the newest Corps two-dimensional model shows much less flood risk than the FEMA one-dimensional model that was not accepted. And then also finally the upper river, which is even a little more dramatic, where the 2016 model was showing flooding even south of Chinden, where the Corps two-dimensional model, it shows some random flooding down city streets upstream of Veterans Memorial. There's flooding on the Boise City side, but the impacts are much less significant. And my professional opinion is, and having reviewed the model, spent quite a bit of time in what the Corps recently produced, this most recent model that the city paid a good chunk of money for, I think 1/3 of the cost, produces the most accurate representation of actual flood risk in the valley, really in Garden City limits, based on the assumption that the Greenbelt levees, they're non-certified levees, that they fail. So this is all assuming total failure of those uncertified levees, versus the one-dimensional model that was previously produced through the FEMA exercise, which shows significantly more flooding. It puts a lot more people in the 100-year floodplain, which even if they don't have actual risk, it puts them at actuarial risk, where they're paying flood insurance, where they likely do not today. And you can argue back and forth as to whether it's a meaningful cost. But what we've proposed to the mayor and to staff is really to take this latest two-dimensional model that the Corps created. There's a lot of value in that model. A lot of money was spent by Garden City to create that model. Now, take it a step further, go back to FEMA with that and say, hey, FEMA, we have a better model. It was produced by the Corps of Engineers. We put together a letter of map or vision, which is a formal request to change the maps. Because today, since the 2016 model was not adopted, the 2003 flood model is still the one that controls development in Garden City. So Garden City development requires, really, as a developer, you look at both the current effective model, the 2003 model, the 2016 model, to see if that might be worse, and then try to figure out how to address that as a developer. It's kind of a complicated set of steps, and in some areas it's it's leading to more conservative flood protection than is really required. But, the city has to protect itself, and if the seclusion process ends, FEMA adopts the 2016 model. That becomes the model that developers have to base all their work on. The idea is to take the two-dimensional model to FEMA and say, FEMA, we've got a better model. Let's adjust the flood maps. The challenge behind that is it's not really been done that way. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues. FEMA looks at the 2016 model as the best available information today. It was just not adopted. We're going to go back to them. We're proposing to go back to them and say, we've got better information now, FEMA. Here's the two-dimensional model, but we feel everybody we've talked to is we've got to argue that we'll use the 2D model to update that one-dimensional effort that was done in 2016 and really propose to them, we've just got better information. We're correlating it to the process that you FEMA put together in 2016, and just work with them to figure out, can we adopt the 2D model just straight up, which would actually be golden, or do we have to work with their 2016 one-dimensional models? There's a number of what ifs here, because we're trying to keep it in the letter of map revision process. We do not want to create a restudy. A Boise River restudy is a next step. That's a very significant step, kind of like what the FEMA and the Corps did in 2016, and would be conservatively hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what we're trying to do is just use the data that we got, go to FEMA, say we got better information, and then also focus on the upper Riverside Hotel, basically down to, I think it's Plantation. It's really the upper end of the River Club, kind of below Veterans Memorial. And the reason we're focusing on that upper reach, it's the least complicated from a flooding perspective. And then also we worked with city staff about 4 years ago on the River Club ownership, and we did a letter of map revision there. The River Club folks paid for that. And so we've actually anchored a spot in time and place in 2021 where we did a letter of map revision. We got it approved by FEMA. So what we're proposing to do is go from the upper city limits down to that work we did in 2021 and sell them on, hey, we've got better data. Here's a better solution. And depending kind of how that works out, we put the submittal together, we send it to them. If we get a favorable response, we say, and we finalize it, and if it's a really favorable response and they say, hey, that 2D model the Corps just put together is great, we actually just roll it out for the whole city. If they're a little more hesitant about it, maybe we stay focused in the upper city, but we just kind of, what we're trying to do is mitigate this so we don't turn it into an open-ended project for the city where it just goes and goes and goes. Because working with FEMA can be complicated. Well, it is complicated. It's just a matter of, getting them to accept a project they feel comfortable with. Once you get down toward Glenwood Street and the lower city, the flooding issues get a lot more complicated and complex. But at the same time, there's less development going on there. I mean, it's pretty much fully developed. So by focusing on their upper river, it's less complicated. There's still development in progress, which it makes it more complicated for the city and for staff. So by focusing on that, we feel we can do the most good for the city, and also work with FEMA on a section that's not overly complex, I guess. It's fairly straightforward the way the flooding works. And then worst case scenario, FEMA's just like, yeah, this isn't going to fly for whatever reason. Then we would come back and say, well, what do we do now? And maybe it's stop, maybe it's pick another piece of it off. We've never had FEMA in my 28 years. We've never had FEMA just say no. Usually it's more of just a long circuitous path to get to the end result. What we're proposing is a phase one, two-phased approach, really. Based on our experience, it's still a pretty big letter of map revision. we're saying about $75,000 to get to FEMA. There's an $8,000 review fee that goes to them. That's included in that. We see where the response is, and then we scale a phase 2 to their response. And so that's in the ordinance request is $175,000. That's based on our experience of about what these things are lift wise, as far as just the time and materials from a consulting perspective. And we expect kind of a 12 to 18 month time frame. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So one point, just to clarify, so we kind of think that the 175 is what we think it'll cost, right? So it's maybe less, depends kind of on what happens in phase 2. So the first, it's broken up in kind of fiscal years. So the $75,000 would happen this fiscal year. The good news on that is we did get a rebate from our last study of about $28,000. So we reduced that 75, and I've applied that to this 75. So it's, that's money we've already got in the bank. So it'd be 75 less the 28, so that would be the cost this fiscal year. And then next year we've allocated $100,000, but we don't know. It depends on their response, right? They come back and they're willing and going to work for us, and hopefully it'll be less than that, because they're going to, if they come back and say, we love your 2D model, it's the latest and greatest technology, we've used the Corps as our modeling agency in the past, we trust them, it's great, then it could be a lot less money. We just don't know, right? So I'm just kind of planning for contingencies there. And, but again, this is the thing about that southern portion, the reason why we talked about including it is, one, it's undeveloped. We have our urban renewal agencies in that area, so we're expecting future development. And all of that entire area is also in the upcoming opportunity zone. And so which we're going to apply for. And so if we're successful in getting opportunity zone, that's going to bring a lot of investment dollars into the city. And it'd be nice to have a clean map. So those, one reason why it's the top of my priority list, or one of them, is because of those factors all kind of coming to a head, which would really benefit the city. So, leave anything out there, Mr. Cross?
Mayor, members of the council, no, I think that generally covers it. I mean, it's with all of these, any FEMA process, every client asks for more certainty and wish we could give it, but it is an uncertain process. I mean, the one certainty we can give you is we've never been rejected. We've everyone I've worked on, we've figured out a way. But the way the process works, you submit to FEMA, you can't get comment until you submit. I mean, you can't like ask what ifs in advance. It just doesn't, they don't do that. And then it goes to a third-party reviewer when you do submit. It's usually another consulting company. They could be in Texas, they could be in New Jersey, Boston, worked with people all over the country. Most of them are pretty good. Some of them don't know where Idaho is, but they tend to want to work with you. The consultants tend to be solution oriented to get to a point where they feel they can defend it to FEMA, because that becomes their job. Then, we show them why we have good information. Then the consultant kind of takes it to FEMA and says, yes, they've checked all these boxes. And then FEMA usually comes back with, well, we want to check these new boxes that nobody knew about. And so there's always some back and forth, and that's kind of why they drag out, because there's been this, we submit, they have 90 days to review and comment. And a lot of times they comment on day 89 and a half. And we respond, and then they got 90 days to comment. And it's very much a back and forth. But we've always figured out a way to get through that. But it's a little bit expensive. It's just a lot of hours is kind of what it comes down to. And the way we always do these is we just put a cap on it, and we've always stayed under the cap we proposed. But I mean, I have a feeling this one's going to get pretty close to it. I mean, it's a lot of river. It's under a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of citizens involved. So it'll get looked at pretty closely.
And in my mind, the bigger risk is having everything in that yellow be our new map. And if that happens, almost 100% of the city is in the floodplain and very difficult to develop. So that's the other reason. It's like the risk, never been rejected. They like to negotiate. So we're kind of, I mean, that's kind of when we were talking about, it's like, well, they've never said no. They've always been able to work with us in some way, shape or form. So we're counting on that. Hopefully they'll be favorable and adopt the 2D model. But if we do nothing, then the risk is we come out of seclusion and the entire city's underwater in the map, from a map perspective. And it's very difficult to do development in Garden City. So, all right.
Mayor, one other point too is with the city being on board, the city being the applicant, it helps on these things to have support from the local jurisdiction. You being the local jurisdiction, the city of Garden City having a challenge currently, my expectation that will help the process. It's like, hey, we, the city of Garden City, we're trying to get to a resolution, FEMA. We have better information. We, Garden City, paid a lot of money to get this model. Now we're taking it to you to adopt this. That helps a lot more than when we take one to FEMA from the private sector and the local jurisdiction's not so wild about it. That's a lot harder lift. So I and that's probably where we'll go to staff too, to ask for support. We get letters, we'll probably ask for a letter of support from this group should you elect to move ahead. This is a big deal for the city, and really couch it like that. Hey, we, the city of Garden City, are coming to you, FEMA, with better information. We want to get to a better place. We want to end this seclusion process. That'll be a big selling point that we would put forward on this.
Thank you. And it also vindicates all the money that we spent to get that darn 2D model in the first place. So that was painful. But if it but we got that model, it's favorable to the city. We paid a lot of money for it. So if we can convince them to do that, then it'd be like, okay, we're vindicated on that spend. So anyway, any further questions for Mr. Kraus?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Mr. Kraus, a few questions. Where's QRS located? Are they here in Boise or Garden City? Where are they located?
Mayor, council member, we are right off next to Catherine Albertson Park. We've been here in Boise we're in Boise, not in Garden City, but we've been in Boise for a very long time.
And then follow-up question, with your permission, where do you argue this with FEMA? Is it back in DC? Is there an office in Bothell? Where's the argument?
It's Mayor, council member, it's through the consultant typically. FEMA does a really good job from their perspective, probably of insulating their technical reviewers from us, and I think the members of the public, people complaining. So they keep the process very formal. And so it goes through the consultant. But letters of map revision are fully technical in nature. And that's where the restudy thing gets very complicated. There's a whole public hearing process and everything. Letters of map revision are absolutely technical. So if the technical data supports your argument, there's not, really an opportunity to work around that from the FEMA level, because the technical reviewer, the consultant says, okay, yes, the technical argument that's being presented makes sense, FEMA. They presented this, so it stops at the technical level at FEMA. And so basically the FEMA reviewer will say, oh yeah, they've checked these boxes. Usually what they come back with, they want us to run a what if scenario. What if A happens? How does that affect B? But there's not really room in the process for a political decision or somebody doesn't like something. There is an appeal process once you get through FEMA where anybody in the general public can protest it, but they have to again do it from a technical level. So that's, I guess, the general benefit. It's really not a persuasive argument as so much as we and really the Corps has developed a model that meets all of these requirements. We demonstrate that it meets requirements for FEMA to accept it. And then they'll just ask questions about, or they think, well, we want to look at this alternative or whatever. So it's very much a technical review, a technical argument.
So the technical review could be assigned to any individual that has the certification and ability nationally. There's a
Consulting
like
firm.
I'm assuming that there's a pool nationally, and it's a lot of whoever gets the, oh, here's a Garden City floodplain map, I'm going to review it. Assigned to the guy that has room in his queue.
Yeah, Mayor, council member, that's generally correct. CDM Smith is the company. There's a joint venture out there, has lately been getting Boise reviews. There's two people we've generally been working with. One we really enjoy working with. She's in Boston. One is okay. And he's done one model on the Boise River for us. They've tended to go to the kind of a group that have done work in Idaho. There were some changes 2 years ago where contractors changed out. And so we had some change contractors, and that made things a little more difficult. But they do tend to try to get it to the same pool at least, which is helpful.
Thank you.
Request a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we tried.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Kraus, thanks for your presentation. $175,000 is a lot of money in our city.
A lot of money.
A ton of money. It's just a lot. With the state of FEMA, since the new administration took office, over 12,000 people have been cut or moved to the Department of Homeland Security in advance of getting cut. What's the likelihood that this would even land on audience? What I don't want to do is gamble money that isn't going to net us any actionable. I understand they're operating at emergency level as far as their staffing. They're backlogged. That in reality, what are our chances? What's your experience with that since January 20th of 2026?
Mayor, council member, it's a good question. A lot has changed at FEMA, and I guess I don't know exactly the best way to answer it. I kind of threw out there the real at-risk piece, I think $75,000, where we get it to them and see what they have to say. A lot has changed at FEMA, but the one thing, what happened, they lost a lot of internal technical reviewers, so they've been relying more on external reviewers. It really, we just wrapped up not too long ago, similar process in Boise, on Cottonwood Gulch, St. Luke's Hospital. That process spanned the change in administration and all the changes at FEMA. It frankly didn't seem to do anything differently. It slowed things down for a while people at FEMA were trying to figure out what to do. But the process seemed to just stay as obnoxious and onerous as ever. Because it's my opinion, but it's very much a bureaucratic process, but the bureaucratic process has not seemed to change. And, there are no 100% sure assurances with any federal agency. And I understand too, the amount of money you guys have put in to this process to date. And I'm not even lobbying for this project. It would be an honor to help out the citizens of Garden City to get clear of this, because I know it's kind of been hanging over everybody's heads here for a decade, basically. I'm not a taxpayer in Garden City, though. If you know, you folks decide not to move ahead, that's, you know, fine. If you move ahead, we'll do our absolute very best to figure this out. I think after we get into that first submittal, we're going to know if we have a project or not, which is still a lot of money. It's not the 175. I tried to put a top end cap on this thing, but I know it'll take us $50,000 to $75,000 to get it to FEMA. And that money, I would say, is at risk. We've had good success, but I can't say anything with FEMA's 100%.
It's frustrating to me, sorry, Mr. Kraus, it's frustrating to me that this map that's being used from 2016 would not contemplate the dedication of Esther Simplot Park on November 2nd of 2016, which created, in effect, a number of levees. The Ada County Park, which is about to be dedicated, which also takes water off, you know, by routing strain off of the river. It's just frustrating to have them use a model that's so old and doesn't contemplate development that's happened since then that directly affects our water flow.
Mayor, council member, I hear you. When FEMA's moved away from unregulated levees, so the 2003 model, the current effective model, it allows for the green belts to function as a levee. The 2016 model, they assume 100% failure. You know, they don't exist. They basically do not exist, which is not reality. But that's the assumption. And we've tried actually on the St. Luke's model, Mountain Cove Road, where it comes down by the Fort Boise Military Reserve. It's got a concrete retaining wall alongside of it. It's not a certified levee though, but it protects a lot of, it's, you know, kind of that Federal Reserve area from flooding. They made us eliminate it from the model. It's not accurate. It's not reality, but it's not certified by the Corps of Engineers as a levee. You know, you got to go through the certificate, you know, or has to be built to Corps standards, and then FEMA will certify it, and the city, the local agency has to adopt it, and then they will allow it. Otherwise, they just, and what we would be presenting to FEMA, this two-dimensional model, assumes that, again, in Garden City, 100% failure of these unregulated levees up and down, you know, Garden City limits. But it presents a better picture of what happens once the water gets out into the floodplain than the 1D model does. But because we've also got a version of this that shows the unregulated levees not failing, and that's a much better, you know, outcome, but that is not acceptable from, you know, the way FEMA looks at flooding today. And the $170 million project that was proposed was really to turn all the greenbelt into levees, you know, that the Corps put together. I think the highest cost version, just turn it all into regulated levees, which would require logging large portions of the river. And you got it from a certified levee, you got to have big setbacks and all of that stuff. There's no good answer to that one. And I've tried to argue things that were much bigger than levees through FEMA and usually failed.
Mr. Kraus, thank you for the answer. In this, let's just for the sake of argument, assume the ceiling at 175,000, which for Garden City is a lot of money. What percentage of that is a lobbying effort versus the technical letters? How does that line item out?
Mayor, council member, it's 100% technical narrative. I mean, there's a little bit of time in here in that budget for presentation to this group working with staff, but it's a technical exercise. It's all engineering.
Thank you.
Further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Russ.
Mr. Kraus, thank you for your time today and enduring all our questions. I'm going to add to that a little bit. It sounds like you know, or your team knows, that there is a big difference in the variables between the two models. So the levee failure. Is there anything else? Because I cannot imagine
that CFS and that yellow map would be massive. And so is there anything that somebody's assuming that one of the 3 dams fails a little bit or something? Is there, maybe not a full failure, of course, but, I can't imagine what that CFS would be in that yellow map.
Yeah, Mayor, council member. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the yellow map is truly based on just the base flood, 16,600 CFS with complete failure of the levees. However, what a one-dimensional model does is there's a cross section all the way across the floodplain, pick Riverside Hotel or something. The next cross section is going to be maybe 400 or 500 feet downstream. A one-dimensional model just takes, it actually starts downstream and calculates back upstream. We've got this section and we're showing this much flooding across it. And the next one, it calculates back up to it and there's this much flooding. It interpolates, it assumes everything is wet between the two. And so it's a very, very, very approximate way of looking at flooding. And versus a two-dimensional model, you take the land surface and you look at all of the landform. And that's what we see in the two-dimensional model is water runs down streets. You would expect that. And a lot of what we saw, because we've done work with that one-dimensional model and we've done work with the two-dimensional models in this area. The two-dimensional model, we really see it. There's a lot of the flooding that's that deep. It can be 1/10 of a foot deep, it can be 500ths of a foot deep, or it can be 2 feet deep. And that yellow area doesn't discriminate. It doesn't gerrymander for streets. It doesn't assume, oh yeah, this water gets out to, take your pick, the next parallel street to the river. And it just runs down the street. A 1D model doesn't see that. It just assumes it runs across all the land. The two-dimensional model, it sees the street. And it's like, well, now we've got, a bunch of water running down the street. So the people on the other side of the street, they don't get wet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
If you want to see these maps more detail, I've got them posted in my office. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Dorsey.
Apologies, but I have a couple more questions. You mentioned the River Club had an LOMR. Were you involved with that process?
Oh yeah, we did that for them.
And how long was that process? Do you
Bob
recall?
Taunton's on the line. He could.
Oh.
I think that was in the 6 to 9 month range.
Okay.
But that was literally for 500 feet or so. It was kind of a problem area right at the upstream of the golf course where they subdivided 3 new lots there, and we worked with those landowners. And in the world of letters of map revision, that one was really straightforward. But what it really gives us is an anchor in time with FEMA, because hey, FEMA, remember you approved this. We've got better information now, above it, and above it is Boise City has adopted the 2016 model, which this new two-dimensional model matches into fairly well. Because you got the bridges there, you got I-84, Fairview, and Main Street. So everything the river all comes together again right there. So that's another fixed point in time and place. And then we've got our letter of map revision that we did in 21. And we tie those together where we've got known good information.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Kraus. No worries. So you mentioned, of course, the focus really on more the eastern boundary of the city, heading west to. Can you describe that end?
It's
again.
Yeah, it's Plantation Drive.
Okay.
Basically.
And then you mentioned that if there seemed to be maybe some receptiveness to FEMA, that at some point that potentially that we could approach them about looking at the entire city or adopting it for the entire city. Do you see that as being potentially being included in this 175? Or do you think that there's this possibility that we would be looking at additional work after this in order to get the entire city included?
Council member, mayor, council member, I thought about this quite a bit. Is we're picking off the upper river because it is simpler, frankly, and we can tie into the work we did in 2021. Best case scenario, they're like, wow, the Corps did a fantastic job on this $3 million model that between Garden City taxpayers and the rest of us taxpayers paid for. They adopt it. We've got to make some changes to it because it was really built to, the model was developed really to look at levies and things like that. And we've got to make a few changes to it to go to FEMA. But that's the best case scenario. They just, and if this is a great model, well, it's like from our perspective, then what we would say is, well, great, it looks great for the upper river. Let's just adopt the whole thing. And they would likely go along with that. If they're concerned about the two-dimensional model, just because Boise City is using the 2016 1D model, the city of Eagle and Ada County downstream are using the one-dimensional model. They've adopted it. Then we're like, okay, great. We can adopt, we'll modify the 2016 one-dimensional model to produce as close a results as we can get to the 2D model. It won't be perfect. It won't be as good, but we can use the 2D model to influence what the 1D model output looks like. And we get them to adopt that. That's going to be kind of complicated. If we have to go that route, we likely just get the upper portion of the city. The lower portion, there's interest, and we could potentially get the whole thing if FEMA's even really favorable to that. The lower portion, we kind of looked at it, it's developed out. A lot of those, especially below Glenwood, a lot of those folks could really, if they're concerned about flood insurance, they could go through the letter of map amendment process, like on a lot by lot basis. Basically, you come to somebody like us and say, my house is actually a foot above, base flood elevation. And you can go to FEMA and it's it's like $5,000 to $10,000 and it's an administrative process and they'll remove your house and then you don't have to pay flood insurance. So there's a lot of options when you get to the lower river. And then I also know there's a lot of interest with, I don't want to hate to put the River Club folks on notice when I know they're on the phone right now, but there's a lot of interest in their doing something in their reach of the river anyway, all the way along there. And so there's always the idea in the lower river of maybe looking at public-private partnerships, or maybe it's privately funded or something. We were really looking, when I was talking to the mayor and staff, how can we get a meaningful project and then not just, ask for a bank account number, frankly, and turn this into a restudy. Because if FEMA really looks at it as a restudy, that's $500,000 to $1 million. That's a whole nother thing. But, we feel pretty good. We can get a letter of map revision for the upper piece of the river because it's fairly simple. It just kind of overtops its banks over there. There's not a lot of complicated flow. And we've got, the parks on the right side of the river, the Boise City side too, that takes some of the pressure off Garden City. So that's kind of what we're thinking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, again, the ask is, so really what we're trying to do is leverage everything, right? So we're leveraging earlier studies, we're leveraging technology of the 2D model. If the FEMA approves the 2D model, then we'll leverage that to roll the whole city in. That's really kind of the play we're looking for on this. In terms of, we've got the $75,000 this year, 28 of it is already in the bank. So any additional money is what, 57? 47. 47, excuse me, is 47. So not 75. And then we kind of get a go, no go is the way I'm understanding from Mr. Kraus. And so if we get favorable, then we'll be more assured that we'll get a positive outcome. Then we go. If they come back and want to restudy, it's going to cost us $500,000, and that changes the decision altogether, right? But the whole goal is to do this, get them to adopt the 2D model, convince them, work with them to do that. That'll cost us $47,000, and then we'll know what we want to do next, and hopefully it's positive, and then we'll get a little bit better idea of, Mr. Kraus come back in 2027 fiscal year, say, okay, where are we, do you think, on that spend in terms of their reaction? They have 28 years of experience to be able to give us some of that detail. So, any further questions for Mr. Kraus? Thank you. Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
You did great answering those questions. Thank you. It's very informative. And again, I've got the map in front of my desk. If you ever want to look at it, stare at it like I do every single day, you're welcome to come up and I can explain it a little bit further. It's got pre-seclusion where we're at now. It's got the new map of what it would look like if we come out of seclusion, which is not pretty. And then it also has the 2D map, and it's for that cross section of the Midtown. I've got.
So, Mr. Mayor, and maybe this will be a follow-up question about the whole question of seclusion. So what would that do to the seclusion of the rest of the city if this were not to, let's just say we were get the approval, FEMA is going to say, yes, we're going to move forward, but there's still the rest of the city that's still in limbo.
Would they stay in seclusion?
Would they stay in seclusion, or would they automatically revert? And then you have the rest of the city that's potentially facing much higher premiums on their flood insurance.
Mayor, Council Member Carver Herbert, I would believe that the city would stay in seclusion unless a couple of things would happen. The most ideal would be that this mapping effort is successful, and then the city would ask for FEMA to release or vacate that designation. FEMA could come back prior to that or and say you've been in seclusion long enough, we're taking that designation away. On the west side, there are some benefits in some areas to have that seclusion designation go away. For example, on the south side of the river, there are some properties that are currently designated in the floodway, not the floodplain, and that's very arduous for those property owners. Every time they want to put a swimming pool in, they have to do what's called an H&H model, which is quite a bit of somebody's time, like Mr. Kraus, and it becomes quite expensive for them. And the FEMA, I'm going to call it the 2016 model, does not designate the properties in that way. Certainly there is a lot of yellow in the FEMA 2016 model if that were to go away without success of the mapping. Well, and I guess I have a question for Mr. Kraus. Even with the Lomer on the east side, would that affect any of the upper side showing, because the model is different, but maybe not? Of the west side of town. Yeah, so I guess it just wouldn't affect it, even though the model would be updated on the east side.
Thank you. My other follow-up question about this would be, I think, thinking about the public process. So when the city went through the initial, I believe, the decision-making to go into the agreement with the Corps of Engineers to do the original study, there was a big public process. There was a neighborhood meeting. There was people able to come and have input that and to ask questions. Do you see any role for that at this point in the time or in the near future?
Mayor, Councilmember Carver Herbert, in 2016, when there was that big process, that was actually FEMA initiated outreach to the public. Not that the city hasn't had its own outreach. The city has tried to make sure that the public has known about this, because it's a big thing for the city that the public should know about. But to the best of my knowledge, and I am answering questions that I'm not wholly qualified to answer, but in the small little Lomers that I've seen, nothing big like this, there's no public outreach that's required. It would be in the city's, in those properties' benefits, and so it's not going to make something worse for them or change things aside from potentially reducing their insurance need or I don't believe, and then this is another question, I don't believe it would make it worse for anyone, but I guess I would defer to Mr. Kraus on that as well.
I do know that I've been asked a lot about our floodplain and never once has anybody said, please leave it the way it is. They've all encouraged us to try to do whatever we can to shrink the size of our floodplain, FEMA floodplain map. I haven't had any.
That's true.
haven't had a single person.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, yes, I would agree with that. I think it's just an understanding what people have an understanding of what the process really is. And could it mean
Yeah.
perhaps higher rates for some and others not?
Mr. Kraus, any comment?
Yeah, Councilmember Mayor, there is a kind of a piece of the public process. FEMA does require that every property owner that's going to be affected be notified. But it's a requirement of notification, and it's normally a written notification. We would have to figure out how to handle that through the city one way or another. But responses go to FEMA. There's like you, the citizen, if you're very concerned, they can be collected locally, but ultimately FEMA requires that they be technical in nature. You know, that's why it's the letter of map revision, you're keeping it all technical. So if somebody really, really hates it, they can go hire HDR or somebody and try to come up with a solution that keeps them in the floodway or keeps them in the floodplain. We do see people complain once in a while, but it's a little different than the public hearing process. You know, more or less it's collecting responses and then providing those to FEMA. So.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Kraus.
Thank you.
So I think with that, moving on to item G1, it's authorizing me to enter an agreement with QRS Consulting to provide service to assist the floodplain amount not to exceed 175 pending legal review of the agreement. And Mr. Kraus is going to send one of those over to Charlie, and he'll review that and make sure it's okay for the city before I would sign anything like that. And again, the agreement's going to be $75,000 this fiscal year, and then kind of a not to exceed 100K the following year. And again, we've already got, it's really 47 because we've got 28 in the bank. So with that, can I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember?
having had the interesting situation of being called in to meet with the owners of Fisher's Technology to review flood insurance and concerns regarding the city's position on the floodplain and the floodplain study and moving forward with strategies to reduce flood insurance for both businesses and of course as a private individual within the city, and somewhat concerned about adopting the 2000 or being forced into the 2016 map in understanding the not exact cost, but the increased cost to incurred to get flood insurance. I find it very reasonable to move forward with strategies to assess whether or not and to develop strategies to modify the designations and reduce the floodplain designation within the city. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve an amount not to exceed 175,000 to QRS Consulting pending the legal review of the agreement.
I'll second.
Got a motion second. Any discussion on the matter? Okay, Clerk, call roll, please.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you very much. This is very important. I know it's expensive, and I know the apprehension on that, but if we get this go, the benefits are significantly worth that spend. So thank you, Mr. Kraus, for your explanation and your time. Okay, moving on to item 2. This is a resolution for approving a private city donation for Kano's vest that we saw today. So, Ms. Wadums?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have a legal memorandum on page 84 of your packet. The proposed resolution is on page 89 of your packet. And then if you wanted to see the vest that the officers picked out, the picture of the vest with the specs on it are on page 92. And then a picture of Kano putting on the vest for the first time is on page 93. And so
We
the
modeled
officers,
it today.
yeah, and he modeled it today. So this resolution is just to make everything legal and transparent. What the resolution says is that the city would accept $1,000 charitable donation for the public purpose of keeping our canines safe. And that it's going to be used exclusively for that public purpose. The donor was, it was very important to her that the money goes to the dog and not for some other purpose. So that's in the resolution. These things are expensive though. So when I was going through this, it's $1,600 and the donor only had 1,000 to give. So then the additional 600 came out of the police department budget. This is the ballistic vest that they wanted to keep our dog safe. Kano. Coincidentally, though, recently I sent out an email. Councilmember Jorgensen asked for an update on the incident that happened in 2025 where a guy battered two of our officers and also battered the dog. That's the same dog. So that's Kano. Kano got battered by that guy and now Kano gets a new vest. So that's pretty cool. And I think he likes it, but I was hearing this. I think he really likes it when they put the vest on him. Yes. So this is just to make it completely transparent. I have no conflicts of interest, even though I'm related to the donor. She loves dogs and she'd like them to be safe. So I'd request that you approve the resolution and I stand for questions.
Okay, any questions from Ms. Wadums? Okay, may I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page?
with gratitude to the donor and for her benevolence and love of animals, I move to approve resolution 1247-26.
I would second.
Yeah, motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk call roll, please.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert?
Yes.
Resolution number 3 is approving an agreement between the Urban Renewal Agency and the city. They requested anytime there's an approval of a project that we now have just kind of a legal document that's going to be standardized between the both of us. Mr. Schmidt, any discussion on that? Any comment?
Mayor, council members, that's a perfect lead in. That's exactly what's going on. I think urban renewal at this point in time with the state legislature, they want to make sure that all the money is accounted for and that when there was a request from the city for certain projects that we follow through with some kind of agreement between the city and urban renewal. And that's what this document will be. It's basically going to be a template that we will use for every project that is presented and approved by the urban renewal area or district. So I believe you will see a few of these in front of you as time goes on here.
Mr. Wadums?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a legal memo starting on page 94 of your packet. There's a proposed resolution on page 99 of your packet, and then the memorandum of understanding that's an attachment to the resolution starting on page 101 of your packet. This is basically for just financing and reimbursement so that the city can get reimbursed for this. This is a big project. And let me get some dollar figures. Urban Renewal approved, so they're going to pay for part of this project on 40th and 41st. Urban Renewal approved $1,100,045,344.20 for their contribution for this project. Not all of this project is in the Urban Renewal District, so the city does have to pick up some of it that's outside of the district. But this is just a reimbursement agreement, so they have a understanding, Lisa, and then whoever over at Urban Renewal has an understanding for how to submit invoices, how the city gets reimbursed, and so on. This is a template. The attorney for Urban Renewal, her name's Megan Conrad. I had worked with her for years and years. She's a great attorney, a great person. She drafted this. I did ask for a couple changes last week. I asked for a couple changes. She said no problem, but she hasn't got to it yet. And it's just including a termination clause and some things like that. So there's going to be 3 slight tweaks to this agreement once she gets around to it. So I would recommend a motion to approve this resolution subject to the final legal review, excuse me. I'm happy to tell you what those 3 changes were, but I don't think you particularly care on those. This is a template we're going to try to use. So there has already been financing approval for the K Street water main and the sewer project and the well 4 rehab project. And I note that on page 94 of the packet. So you will see, like the mayor said, you will see a similar MOU for those 2 urban renewal projects when the time is right. We're hoping to just take this template and use the same template for one of these things for every one of these projects, which is a partnership between the city and urban renewal. We have a great relationship with urban renewal. Megan Conrad's great to work with, and that's my recommendation. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Bottoms? Okay, I have a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rasmussen.
I'm enthusiastic about getting the ball rolling on this project, so I would move that we approve Resolution 1248-26 for the water main replacement on 40th and 41st, excuse me.
Councilmember Rasmussen, to include approval pending final legal review.
Sounds good to me, yeah.
I would second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just would like to thank the city for applying this template-based program. I think that's going to really help alleviate drain on staff to have a template, if you will. So very creative. Appreciate the people that came up with that.
Yeah, it was a good partnership with the URA, and boy, what a blessing these agencies are, and hopefully Sochi will be just as beneficial as the one down in the water district has been. So
agreed.
All right, clerk call please.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Moving on to 4, this is the second reading. This is the rezone we did on that little property last meeting. And so I just need a motion for a second reading.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Russ.
make that motion for a second reading of ordinance 1067-26 by title only.
And I would second.
All right, any discussion? All right.
Councilmember Rasmussen?
Yes.
Councilmember Carver Herbert?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Second reading ordinance 1067-26, an ordinance by the City of Garden City Municipal Corporation providing for rezone of certain real property described herein from C2 mixed use commercial to C1 highway commercial, amending the zoning map of the City of Garden City to reflect said change, providing for severability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Great, thank you. Moving on to our last item, a public hearing. This is for DEQ grant to construct a new well. And so this is a great project as well. Director Schmidt.
Mayor, council members, part of the grant process with IDEQ for their state revolving fund, SRF fund, is that we have a public hearing, and tonight qualifies as the public hearing. So the well itself will help replace well 4 that we're currently, as we heard a little while ago, urban renewal is going to help do a little maintenance to it and get it up to speed. The new well will be located at 38th Street at the operations center in our yard. We just happen to have the perfect place for it. So, and it's on our property. The nice thing is that the state revolving fund has a special program that will fund a well such as this. And what we're expected to get is about $2.197 million for this project, which will cover the well, everything. At this point in time, we have drilled a test well, which urban renewal paid for, and we're hoping to get reimbursed from the state revolving fund for that work. We'll see how that pans out, but we've found the quality of water at that area to be just what we were looking for. So that is going to be the new home of a brand new well for Garden City, a pretty good sized production well. So it'll be a huge feather in our hat. Not only domestic water, fire safety, that's a big part of our water that we have to keep on reserve in case we have fires. So it'll be quite a nice addition to our portfolio at this point. So I only know what to do in a public hearing because of what I watch when I watch Jenna do this. So I will stand for any questions that you have right now, and then I believe the mayor will take it from there.
Any questions for Director Smith? Thank you, Director. I put in a ton of work to get this done, and so the
Yeah.
reason we're getting a $2.19 million grant is because of the efforts of you and your department. So thank you very much. I mean, that is huge. So with that, we will open a public hearing to see if there's anybody in the audience want to testify. Okay, anybody online? That's a cursor, right?
Correct.
Okay, need to change that graphic. So hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and yeah, motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Page.
I move to approve PW 2026-0001 IDEQ grant for to construct a new domestic water well.
I have a
Second.
motion. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just a big thank you to Colin for his work. It's a big number. It's wonderful to be able to secure that.
Yeah, it is big. Clerk, call roll, please.
Councilmember Carver Herbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Rasmussen.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. With that, moving on to any unfinished business? None. Any new business? Hearing none. There's no executive session. So with that, take a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say
Aye.
being adjourned. Thank you all.